It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast, episode number 23. It's a very special episode entitled Beginner's Guide to Buy-to-Let Mortgages. And joining me every week, as always, is Rob, the property geek Dix. Hi Rob, how are you?
Morning Rob, really well thank you. Yeah, we're going to be talking finance in this episode. We've drafted in one of our favourite property experts to help us put together this episode, which we're calling The Beginner's Guide to Buy-to-Let Mortgages. And we're also going to be sharing a news story, which sounds a warning shot to people who are doing city centre holiday lets. And we're going to be showing you how to make distractions a thing of the past with our resource of the week, if you stick around to the end.
And before we get going, you know what's coming up. We're going to send some love and thanks out to our reviewers, the people who've taken time to support this show. And this week, we are thanking the following. Les Page says, I found this a few weeks ago and I've now listened to them all and I'm completely up to date. I've gone back and listened to some again. I've been making notes from them. The two Robs are naturals at this, making this sometimes complex subject seem extremely accessible. I'm still at the education stage of the research, but the advice is top notch, especially the goal setting and resource of the week. I'm hoping this will set me up for my first dip of the toe into the property water. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Les. Thank you, Les. And Danny and Kate say the podcast has everything you need to get started in property. It's interesting, educational, and filled with advice. On top of that, it's funny too. It's not easy to combine these into 30 minutes, but the Robs have made it look easy. I particularly like that Rob and Rob are so approachable and are always willing to answer questions on the topic they love. Keep up the good work, lads. I can assure you, this podcast has started me on my own quest to invest in property. Thank you, Danny and Kate. And I know, Rob, we've both spoken to them as well, so that's really good of them to leave us a review. Thank you, guys. And finally, Alex writes, I'm now hooked. Good work, keep it up. Any advice for beginners on short-let apartments in London to corporate tenants would be great. Well, Alex, we'll definitely do an episode on corporate letting at some point in the future. It's now on our list. Thank you for your suggestion. And if anybody else has any suggestions, please do get in touch. I know many of you have, and we absolutely do listen to you. So if there's anything you would like us to cover, either let us know via your review or via an email.
Thank you so much for your reviews, your suggestions, and your emails as well. We get loads of emails from listeners, and we love them. And this is probably a good time to talk about our meetup. If you're listening to this on the day of release, which you should be, it's a week away. We're doing a little mini meetup in London on the 29th of August. It's going to be really near King's Cross Station, just about 6 in the evening for a couple of hours. It's going to be a really casual, no pressure chance just for us to, well, for you to put faces to voices, which may or may not be a good idea, and us to carry on in person the relationship that we've had with a lot of you already over the internet. It's going to be the 29th of August. You'll need to register for it just so we know how many people are coming and we can make sure we've got the right amount of space. And so to do that, go to thepropertypodcast.com/meetup. There'll be all the information on there. There'll be the address, the timings, everything else. Then all you need to do is pop in your email and your name, and that's it. If you want to bring a friend, you're very welcome to as well. And yeah, we'll just have a little bit of a get together, chat about property, and see how it goes. But we're really looking forward to it.
I'm following on from that, Rob. If people want to get a bit more education, property education in their lives, then head over to rmpproperty.com/property toolkit, because I've added a new audio guide called BMV Explained, which is below market value explained. So if you've ever been baffled by below market value, it's used in so many ways, misused by many. So that audio guide that I've put together there, it's absolutely free in the toolkit. If you've already signed up for that toolkit, it'll be emailed to you. But if you haven't, add yourself to the list. You'll get a load of resources, some great stuff in there. But the audio guide has just been added, and I think you'll find that very useful. So that's what we've been up to this week. But news this week, very interesting, Rob, and something that can directly affect you.
So the story is all about city centre holiday lets, and they're becoming a bit of a hot topic because more and more people, according to the Times, I think the Sunday Times this story is in, more and more people are choosing to stay in private apartments rather than in hotels. So this is becoming a bit of an issue as the sector's grown, and this is of particular interest to me because I've been doing that pretty much non-stop with the odd night in a hotel for about a year and a half now, all over the world, using a website called Airbnb.com, which is is one of the bigger ones, but there are lots of competitors as well. And this sector is getting really big. And this news article is talking about how various cities are now clamping down on it. In New York, it's been made illegal to have paying guests in your home for under 30 days. So they're just clamping down on the short-term lets, and that was due to pressure from hotels saying that it was affecting their business. And I think, Rob, the article, I don't have it in front of me, but from memory it says that they're now making it illegal in Berlin.
Yeah, Berlin's somewhere you've visited recently as well. So New York, obviously, a place you've lived not so long ago, and Berlin from 2015, not only are they clamping down, they're removing it completely. So from 2015, it's going to be illegal to use these short-term lets, apartments for short-term lets, because the rents are very much regulated in Berlin and they have caps on the amount you can charge and so on. So the people who are letting out these apartments can make a lot more than if they just did a long-term let. Well, obviously, a lot of people are getting onto that, and instead of giving their apartments to the normal housing stock, they're letting them out as holiday lets, which you can understand. Well, from 2015, you can't do that anymore. If you know anybody whose strategy is to buy property in Berlin and let them out on short-term lets, you better have a word with them, because it's not going to work for much longer.
I'm starting to worry that it's my fault. Everywhere that I've been, I've behaved so badly that they're just banning the whole thing in all the cities I've been to.
Yeah, you're not leaving many left, Rob, the way you're going.
Yeah, exactly. We'll link to the story. It's a nice little business model if it's done properly, but there are problems that when people do it poorly or when everyone starts doing it. So I can understand why, as it gets bigger, cities are starting to take a look at regulating it or outlawing it or whatever. But take a little look at the story. It's an interesting one.
Well, we've got a very special episode this week. And Rob, it's come from our friend of the show, Lisa Orme.
Big friend of the show. She is the founder of Keys Mortgages. She's also the broker who I use personally, and I recommend her to people all the time. If you've ever emailed me, I've probably recommended her to you. We've wanted to do an episode about mortgages for quite a while, but we are not experts. So we thought we'd get a real expert in to provide the content for this episode, and we'd just talk about it. So what we did is we asked Lisa to write a guest post for our blog, and you can read that now at thepropertypodcast.com. And so she's written us a really great piece introducing buy-to-let mortgages, and we're now going to talk through some of the main points that she made and expand on them a little bit. It's just going to cover the basics, and hopefully, if it goes well, we're going to get Lisa back in the future to do a more advanced guide for us as well. This should be a really good one. First, Rob, we need to have a disclaimer.
We do. I think, Rob, you're the more corporate sounding of the two of us, so why don't you do it? But you've got to be quick when you read this, because on all these adverts, they're quick. So let's see how good you can do.
Okay, I'll put my radio voice on. Here we go. The above is for information purposes only. Rates can change and may not be applicable at the time of publication. Buy-to-let investment carries with it risks. House prices and rents can fall as well as rise. Please consult the appropriate professionals before embarking upon any form of investment. Keys UK Limited is an appointed representative of Tenant Line Limited, authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on a mortgage or other loan secured on it. Think carefully before securing other debts against your home. Buy-to-let, pure and commercial mortgages are not regulated by the FCA. For more details of our terms, fees and disclosures, please go to our website at www.keys-mortgages.com.
Wow, that was quick, Rob. Have you been practicing?
Misspent youth, Rob. Lots of gangster rapping goes on in Watford. You wouldn't know it, but yeah.
You don't look very gangster.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Oh.
All right, so we've got that out of the way. Let's get into the topic. First up, I suppose if we're talking about buy-to-let mortgages, we should talk about what a buy-to-let mortgage actually is. And very simply, a buy-to-let mortgage is distinct from residential in that it's a special type of loan that you get when you want to rent a property out. It's exactly the same as a mortgage on your own home, except that it's specifically for properties that you're going to be renting out. And that means that there are some differences in the things that lenders look at and the things that they will lend on. And that's what we're going to come to in a little bit. A buy-to-let mortgage is something that you'll use on any property you're letting out, with some exceptions. You can't use it on your own home or a second home, so you can't use it for anything where you're going to be living. And there are some other things as well. So Lisa says that you can't use buy-to-let mortgages on properties that you rent to relatives. You can't use them on holiday lets, as we've just been talking about. They need a special type of mortgage. You can't use them on commercial or semi-commercial property, and you can't use them on anything not rented on a standard tenancy agreement, which is an AST. So they're all the things that you can't use buy-to-let mortgages on. Otherwise, if you're renting it out and it doesn't fall into one of those categories, you're going to be using a buy-to-let mortgage.
Okay, so we understand what a buy-to-let mortgage is now and what we can use it for and what we can't use it for. There's a lot of terms used when we look at buy-to-let mortgages. One of the most common is LTV, which stands for loan to value. So loan to value is actually really simple. Loan to value is the percentage of the loan against the value of the property. Okay, so the percentage of the loan against the value of the property. So let me give you an example. If a property is worth £100,000 and you get a mortgage with 70% loan to value, that means that the lender is prepared to lend you 70% of the value of the property. So in this case, £70,000. So you would need a deposit of £30,000, and the rest would be made up by a mortgage, which is £70,000. So that's loan to value. Something to bear in mind when you get a mortgage, loan to value, it's not the value of the property that you think it's worth. Although it says value, it's a little bit misleading. It's actually the purchase price that you're getting it for, because you may have got a really good bargain and you may feel the property's worth 120 instead of 100,000, and that may be the case, but the bank is only going to lend you against that purchase price. So you can't get 70% of 120,000 if you're buying it for 100. So something to bear in mind when you consider loan to value. A little bit misleading in the name, loan to value, but it is actually loan against the purchase price would be a better fit, but it's not as catchy. So LTV, that's what it is. Most lenders on buy-to-lets are comfortably around 75%. There are a few at 80, and there's even one at 85. What I've found over the last few years, just being in the market on a daily basis, is the lending rates and the loan to values are getting better for buy-to-let investors. So there are more products with higher loan to values than there used to be a year or two ago. And the actual rates that people are getting are better than a year or two ago as well. So things are moving in the right direction for lenders. The next term you'll hear used sometimes is rental coverage. And the key factor of a buy-to-let mortgage over a residential mortgage is the amount the lender will lend to you is based upon the value of the property versus the rent that can be achieved. So what do I mean by that? Well, the banks, as we'll cover shortly, they'll look at a variety of things before they lend to you. But one of the key things they're looking at is the property itself. And one of the calculations they perform is a rental coverage calculation. The majority of lenders like to see 125% rental coverage. So what do I mean by that? Well, if your mortgage was £100, so the cost of your mortgage was £100 per month, which would be lovely, you would need to have £125 rent or more to have the adequate rental coverage, so 125%. If it was £400 mortgage payment, then rental coverage would need to be 125%. So £100, 125, £400, 500. Now, in this market, that's actually quite easy to achieve. You know, if you're looking outside of London, the rental returns are very, very strong. Even in London, certain areas are very good too. So that rental coverage can easily be done. In the giddy days of property rises, you know, sort of '01 to '07 when things were booming, rental coverage wasn't always as easy to achieve. It's something to be aware of. In this market, it's pretty easy to achieve, you'll be pleased to hear, but it's worth understanding and knowing about as the property prices start to move in years to come. Okay, so that's rental coverage.
So what we've got there is two different measures that determine how much a lender will give you. One based on the value of the property, which is the loan to value, and one based on the amount of rental income, which is the rental coverage. And generally, they'll only lend on the lower of the two. If you've got a property where you could get really a lot of money in terms of the loan to value, but the rental coverage doesn't match up, that will be the thing that restricts it. Loan to value is what you'll normally hear a lot about when you're reading about mortgages in the press. It's loan to value and the interest rate that are the most common things that you'll see. There is another distinction that you need to keep in mind, and that one is whether you go for an interest only or a repayment mortgage. And this is pretty simple because it's no different from a normal residential mortgage. You might be familiar with it already. Basically, an interest-only mortgage is where you just pay whatever the interest rate is, say it's 5%, every year for the privilege of borrowing the money. If you've got a £100,000 mortgage and the interest rate is 5%, then every year you need to pay £5,000 to borrow the money. When you get to the end of the mortgage term, you still owe the full amount that you borrowed because you've not paid any of that back. You've just been paying the interest fee. So at the end of that time, you need to have another plan for how you're going to pay that money back. The alternative is a repayment mortgage, which is where, as well as paying off your interest every month, you also pay off a chunk of the amount that you borrowed. So you pay that off every month. By the end of the mortgage term, you don't owe anything. You've paid it all back. The property is completely yours, free and clear. The thing about repayment mortgages is because as well as paying the interest, you're paying off a chunk of the borrowing, your monthly payments are going to be higher than if you went for interest only. And for that reason, and some others, the vast majority of buy-to-let lending is interest only. My entire portfolio is interest only, and it's the same for most people. It means that you're monthly profits are higher, it means that it's more tax efficient, and it means that rather than paying back the money every month, you can save your rental profits and either pay it off in a chunk or decide to reinvest it instead of paying down that mortgage. You just got a lot more flexibility. However, there are perfectly good reasons why you might want to go for a repayment mortgage instead. If you're particularly risk averse, it means that your debt is always coming down. So if you're really worried about interest rates or just help you sleep at night, you might want to go for a repayment mortgage. There's a real psychological benefit, as Lisa says, to seeing the amount that you owe coming down over time. And it does mean that whatever happens, you're going to end up in the future with a property that doesn't have a mortgage on it. And that's a pretty great position to be in. That's the distinction. It's a choice that you can make, but the majority of the time, the vast majority of lending is interest only.
And my portfolio is all interest only as well. And one of the other reasons that interest only works is inflation. If you're investing for the long term, inflation is a factor. Now, that's a whole topic in itself, and I'm giving a little sneaky preview of what we're going to talk about next week. So listen at the end to find out what's coming up, but we will definitely be talking about that in more detail next week. So next to look at is the lenders and how they will assess you, the things they will consider. Now, before the credit crunch kicked in, lenders would pretty much lend to anyone. If you had a deposit, and in some cases you didn't even need that, and you could sign a bit of paper, which is the mortgage documents, then you pretty much could get a mortgage. It was that simple. Now, clearly, they're a lot more prudent on who they'll lend to. It's a lot more sensible on how they go about it. Some people would say, actually, they've gone too far. That's in another podcast as well. But it's not just the property they look at anymore. They look at you, the individual. Now, there's some things to consider, and I'll go through them all. Some will be pleasing to hear that it's not as restrictive as you would maybe think, and some are a little bit more restrictive than you possibly hope. So I'm going to go through them all and give you an idea. Okay, so your age, does that come into account? Well, yes, it does. Some lenders will be restrictive as you get later in life, more mature, shall we say. But here's the good news. People can get buy-to-let mortgages in their 70s, 80s, and those mortgages can run in some cases way into your 90s. So yes, they will look at your age, and yes, there will be less lenders as you get older, but don't worry, there are plenty of options out there. Even in this restrictive market, there are plenty of options, because if they can see there's a way for you to pay it back at some point and you can service the debt comfortably if needed, then they'll be more than happy to lend to you. So there are obviously other things, other factors they'll look at, but your age shouldn't be prohibitive from you investing in property. So that's a good news piece. Income, though. The majority of lenders now want to see an income. And the vast majority, they want to see £25,000 or more income. There are, of course, variants on this. Some require very little. Some won't even check your income at all. Some want more. But the majority, that golden figure, is about 25,000. If you earn more than that as a couple or an individual, then there's a tick in the box for you. The majority of lenders will be happy with that. So income, the golden number is 25,000. Don't worry if you earn less than that. There are options there. There are just less of them. But it's good to know the number that most of them are looking for. The next thing they'll look at is if you're a homeowner. So if you are a homeowner, the good news is they will look at you more favourably. They'll see that you've got an asset there already. They'll see that you're used to paying a mortgage on a regular basis, and that goes in your favour. Now, again, it's worth noting that if you're not a homeowner already, there are options available for you. There are just less of them. But if you are a homeowner, there's plenty out there for you, so that's good news. Also, if you are an experienced landlord and you have a property or two, then that goes in your favour as well. Interestingly, though, once you get above 10 properties, it then starts to get a little bit difficult, because lenders will only lend to you on so many properties. So it's kind of a silly situation. They're a little bit restrictive when you start out, and then they're a bit restrictive when you're very experienced. It's sort of, they like the people in between. Don't worry if you're not a homeowner or you haven't got a buy-to-let already. There are options there for you, but they're just more out there for you if you are. So they're the things they'll look at: your age, your income, whether you're a homeowner, lending limits, and so on. So that's the criteria. The good news is lending is easing up. And if you've got good credit and a good deposit, you'll probably be able to get a mortgage. Now, obviously, I'm not a mortgage broker and you'll need to speak to a professional for that advice, but speaking to people on a daily basis and putting lots of people in touch with mortgage brokers, you tend to find that if you've got a good, clean credit report and you've got a healthy deposit, then you'll more than likely be able to get a mortgage.
These factors that about you and not just about the property are a good reason why, if you are worried about any of those things, it might be a good idea to speak to a broker, because if you look at the best buy tables and you see what's got the lowest interest rate. That might not be any good because some of those deals might not be applicable to your situation. For example, if you're self-employed as well, that doesn't have to be a barrier, but it just means that you need to have certain things in place, and some lenders are going to be tougher than others. So speaking to a broker can be a good idea. And I've also written a post, which I'll link to in the show notes, about the things that you can do early to make sure that you can prove all the things that we've just talked about. And so if during the application they ask for any documentation, you know that you've got everything in place. They're looking at you as a borrower more than they used to be a few years ago, but that doesn't have to be a barrier in most situations. Once we've got through all this and we're ready to get a mortgage, we need to work out how to choose the best deal. And this is where, as I just said, you can find a best buy table in any of the newspapers, see what the headline interest rate is, and in theory, make your choice from there based on which is the lowest. But in fact, there are lots of other things that you want to take into account as well. And just because a product seems to have the lowest interest rate doesn't mean that it's going to work out to be the cheapest for you. On top of the interest rate, you're going to have an arrangement fee, sometimes very low, sometimes really high, which can dramatically change the amount that you end up paying over the lifetime of the mortgage. Normally valuation fees and things like that. And then there's the product term to keep in mind as well. You'll often get fixed rates for 1, 2, 3 or 5 years. And while you're in a fixed rate, you can't move to another mortgage product. Lisa gives an example of this and says that if you choose a product that seems to have a really low interest rate, but it's got a really high arrangement fee, and then it's fixed for 1 year, after which it reverts to a pretty high interest rate. That means that even though the interest rate is low, you've got to pay this whacking great arrangement fee. And then in a year's time, if you want to remortgage to a more competitive product, you've got to pay another arrangement fee. So in fact, you might have been better off going for a product in the first place that had a higher headline interest rate, but it works out best for you over time. This is where having a broker can really come into their own, or you can do it yourself. All you have to do is make sure that you read the small print and you factor everything in and add up over the lifetime of the mortgage, what's the end figure I come to, which is going to be the most competitive. It's not always the one that you think. Lisa says that at the time of publication, she suggests working off about a 5% interest rate as an average interest rate at the moment. We've said that that's come down. It might come down further. It might go up again. We just don't know what's going to happen in the future. But at the moment, 5% is a fairly average figure to base calculations around. Obviously, you're going to want to stress test your portfolio and be like, okay, well, if interest rates go up by X, am I still going to be okay? You don't want to be kind of just about okay at 5%. But that's probably the kind of lending that you'll be able to get at the moment.
Okay, great. So that's the beginner's guide to buy-to-let mortgages. So we've looked at what is a buy-to-let mortgage. We've explained what loan-to-value is, LTV. We've looked at rental coverage and why it's important to understand it. We've done a mini debate on interest-only versus repayments, and I'm sure we could do a whole podcast on that, and there's plenty to add to that, which we'll cover in future weeks to come. Then there's what the lenders will look at, your age, your income, whether you're a homeowner or not, your lending limits, and so on. And then it's looking at the deal, not just the headline rate, looking at all the detail. I think what we can take away from this is there's a lot to factor. Sometimes it might be easy to think you can go on moneysupermarket.com, type in the amount you want to lend, click a button and off you go. But as you can tell, there's a lot more to it. And you could be wasting your time going for a mortgage product that's going to take you nowhere because you've not seen some of the finer details that's going to prohibit you moving forward. What I'm coming to is we always recommend using experts. And in this case, using a mortgage broker to assist you with finding a mortgage is invaluable. I still use mortgage brokers when I get mortgages. Rob still uses mortgage brokers. You could argue that we don't need to because we're very much involved in property on a regular basis, but it's not our area of expertise. By using a mortgage broker, it can save you time and money. Now, of course, Lisa Orme is fantastic, and her details are on this podcast show notes that you can get from www.thepropertypodcast.com. Go and have a look at the show notes there. You can get Lisa's details, but you can use any broker. Using a broker is better than not using one at all. Have a look at the show notes if you want to refresh on what we've gone through. If you want to speak with a broker, of course, there's Lisa. There's plenty of other good brokers out there too. And, ask for their advice, and I'm sure you'll find very quickly that they're worth the money.
We've talked in a previous episode about what a great thing leverage is and how that's one of of the best things about property investment. And that means that borrowing is a really important part of most people's property strategies. So it's worth getting it right. Okay, well, Rob, I promise that my attention hasn't been wandering at any point during this podcast, but in case it had done, I believe you've got a resource of the week that would help me keep my attention in one place.
Yeah, and it's not coffee. It's called Focus at Will. Okay, and Focus at Will is something that I've come across quite recently. So I can't say it's changed my life or anything as dramatic as that, but I found it quite useful. Traditionally, the normal attention span for any person is 20 to 30 minutes, okay? That's what research tells us. 20 to 30 minutes is the normal attention span for any person. After that, they need a little bit of a break to refocus themselves. Focus at Will, what it does is it plays music that helps you stay focused for longer. And they claim that the type of music they play will allow you to focus for up to 100 minutes at a time. So instead of 20, 30 minutes, you got 3 or 4 times the amount of time you're able to focus for. Now, I've started to use it. Am I more focused? I don't know. Is it a placebo or is it the very specialist music that they have that allows me to focus more? I can't say yet. But what I can say is it's free. And it's available on their website and on the Android store and the Apple store as well. So go and check it out and see if it works for you. I've only been using it for a week or so I can't say, wholeheartedly that it's a game changer, but it's very interesting. And because it's free, it's worth a look.
I'll give it a go and I'll report back. And if you're listening and you give it a try, let us know on the website if it's been of any good for you. But I'm always interested in any ways of working smarter and harder instead of for longer. Don't want to be just sitting blankly in front of a screen all day and not getting anything done. So it's got to be worth a try. We should stop though, Rob, because I don't know how long we've been going for, but if we go over half an hour, according to your research, everyone's just going to drift off and stop listening. So it'd probably be a good place to wrap up after reminding people about the meetup, which is a week away on the 29th of August. So thepropertypodcast.com/meetup is the place to go for that. All you've got to do is pop in your name and your email, and we would love to see you in King's Cross next week.
Really look forward to meeting everyone who turns up. Please come along. It's absolutely free. It'd be great to see you. And of course, don't forget, you can get our secret episode. For those people who are on our mailing list, they have already received that now, so I hope you're enjoying it. And for a while, we'll give it away to people who sign up to our mailing list. So if you're not on there already, why not? Are you crazy? You get all the episodes delivered to your inbox every week. But it's even better now because we'll give you the secret episode that we will never make public. So it's only for our special subscribers. There's no downsides to that list. There's absolutely no spam or selling. It's just good quality podcasts delivered to your inbox freshly each week. And now, a secret podcast to boot.
I'm worried you're going to say too much. You've got to stop. You've got to stop. It's a secret. We can't have word getting out about this. But yeah, do please join the list if you'd like to have a listen to that. Next week, as you kind of spoiled earlier, we've got an episode about inflation, which sounds pretty dull until you say that the episode's going to be called Inflation, Your Worst Enemy or Your Best Friend. We will see how the debate pans out on that one.
Yeah, sounds much better than Inflation Explained, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Great, okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed that. Once again, thank you to Lisa Orme for putting her time and energy into this episode. We really appreciate it. And all that leaves us to do is wish you a good week, and we'll speak with you again next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.